Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Better Humans at Work. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Andrea Flack-Wetherald. Thanks so much for being with us here today, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me. I love every opportunity to talk with you.
I feel the same way. So, a little bit about Andrea. She is founder and president of the Center for Mindful Improv, and she does amazing work with organizations, with teams, and just helping them build have just go there with the conversations, right? Like go there with the awkward, difficult, brave conversations and helps them build healthier, more inclusive workplace cultures. So thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super looking forward to it.
So you are an improv expert. I'm just going to say it.
You know that sparks immediate imposter syndrome.
Oh, coming from the woman who literally wrote a book on it, which is, as you can see, the funny thing about forgiveness in the background there. It's a wonderful book. It was reviewed by amazing people too, from what I heard.
Yes, yes, only the best.
Only the best. But can you share a little bit with our audience, Andrew? Like, how did you get into this line of work? You know, what and then like leading up to like what does work look like for you? What do you do for the Center of Mindful Improv Thinking?
Yeah. So, how I started this work, my background, as in my degree and my very first professional experiences, are in social work. And so, I started out my career working on a research study that was looking at evidence based practices for helping people change, helping people successfully execute behavior change. And the study was particularly looking at addiction. But what I have realized and what I'm so passionate about is taking those same intervention models that are helpful for drawing out someone's own internal motivation toward change and applying those in a non-clinical setting. So I feel like I just said a whole bunch of words, but what I ultimately, how I came to be where I am now is that I was a social worker and one thing led to another and I found my way into improvised comedy, which is a conversation for a bonfire sometime if anybody would like to hear the details of how that happened and the subsequent conversations over the Thanksgiving table with my concerned family. Um, but the reality is that improv is just a beautiful form of mindfulness practice. It's all about being in the present moment and exploring whatever is happening with the spirit of curiosity instead of judgment. I mean, that right there should pave the way for like, this is why it is so important for brave conversations. This is why it's so useful when we want to talk about real inclusion, like beyond diversifying the workforce. We've got human beings together. How do we honor each other? How do we honor each other in the day-to-day interactions where we, as human beings, make each other upset and find ourselves in moments of disagreement or just bothering each other? I don't know. Anytime you have adults working together and trying to build something that they're proud of, the reality of collaboration is that we are going to damage or even break trust at some point. And so the work that I do now is very centered on brave communication for restoring the vibe when it gets tested. Yeah, that's the answer to that question.
I love that. Okay, I want to get more into doing the brave thing and going there. But
Yeah.
before we get there, can we take a step back and can you talk a little bit more about this connection between mindfulness and improv? Because
Mm.
I remember in grad school, so I went to school for organizational psychology, and I remember mindfulness was always one of the most effective interventions for well-being, for
Mhm.
reducing stress, just for really just dealing with being a human at work essentially. And so so something that's so evidence-based and I'm just so curious, like what's that relationship between improv and mindfulness and how can people
Great question.
practice that?
So in school, what did they teach you that mindfulness practice was?
It was about like centering on the moment and letting go of everything else, just being fully present in the moment.
That's what improv is. That's what improv requires you to do. It
Hmm.
requires you to stay listening because maybe it's helpful to provide a definition just in case anybody is not familiar. When I'm talking about improv, I'm talking about a form of live comedy where everything is made up on the spot. And so it's not some people may have been thinking of stand-up or something like this. That happens a lot. But I'm talking about improv. So we get a suggestion from the audience, the lights go down, they come back up. Nobody is going to save you until your set is done. Like, anything can happen. And no one's going to save you until your set is done. So what that means is that you need to then build something out of nothing just with each other's ideas. And the way there's so much here, and I love it so much. I feel like I'm about to like launch into a plenary session. But what I want people to truly understand about this, there's probably a few things. First of all, the way that we're able to do that when it's not an embarrassing train wreck, which I've certainly been on stage for those shows, ergo the imposter syndrome for anyone to call me an improv expert. I know what it feels like to bomb really hard on stage. But the times that that's not what happens, and the times that you build something that the audience really connects with and enjoys, and you're just vibing with each other, like the performers are vibing with the audience, and you get off the stage and they're like, that wasn't really made up, was it? And you're like, it was, like you just witnessed magic, that incredible, incredible feeling is only possible when we get fully present in the moment.
Yeah.
So what that looks like on stage is literally surrendering the audience, letting go completely of the audience, and just trusting that they will have a good time. They will leave good reviews. They'll tell their friends. They'll come back. All those business objectives comedy is a business. Like, we need those things to happen. So you just trust those objectives will be met, and they will be met better when I prioritize my scene partner. That means completely letting go of any fears that I'm having about if people think I'm funny enough, completely letting go of any need I think that I have to get discovered tonight, and, whatever the mind stuff is. Or here's where it really comes into play: beating yourself up because you had a bad show last time. You see what I'm saying? I love I feel like you're getting it. And so the whole deal with improv, how it connects with mindfulness, is that it truly is mindfulness. It truly is this decision to accept what is and be brave in the way that you build toward what is becoming. And so I blend in skills from mindfulness practice into my work, because the improv skills that are most readily thought of, the yes and, the bring a brick, not a cathedral, rolling with change, the finding your comedic voice and trusting that you are enough, you don't need to be funny how someone else is funny, and all of this that plays into worthiness and all of these things, they are beautifully helpful. And I hope that everybody goes to take an improv class somewhere. If you're in a city that has classes, please take them. It is so joyful, and you will have so many takeaways that surprise you for your professional development, but also just for you as a human. But the thing with bringing in mindfulness practice is that it's easy for those lessons to kind of cruise by if you don't know how to get present with your feelings about them. You know what I mean? Like the observations that you make about, why is it so hard for me to get out on stage? Why don't I remember anything that happened as soon as I get off stage? Why do I cry and tell myself, I'm not good at this, I shouldn't come back, I don't, whatever, when I drive home? Like, learning to get fully present with your reaction to the experience of improv is, I think, where it becomes deeply transformational. And so I teach both things. I teach kind of the improv skills. And whenever I'm doing retreats, you also ask me, what does my work look like? It looks like facilitating staff retreats. It looks like doing virtual training. We've built out 6 virtual, truly 5 trainings and 1 workshop that can be delivered virtually. It looks like one-to-one coaching for people that want to put these practices in place in their brave conversations and need some more support, accountability, clarification on how the processes apply to their specific thing that's happening. So it's the coaching, it's the speaking, it's the virtual training.
Yep.
But when I am on site with people and we do the improv games, it's very much like playing the silly, goofy games that they might have seen on Whose Line Is It Anyway? But then it's also learning box breathing. It's also learning EFT tapping. Are you familiar with EFT tapping? Yes, yes, emotional freedom technique. Um, it's the body scans. It's just learning to get present within yourself and notice, where am I going? When I check out of this moment,
Hmm.
where is it that I'm going and why might that be happening? And
Yeah.
just kind of learning to return. One of our workshops, and then I'll let you ask more questions. One of our workshops is called Breath and Imagination, because these are two things that just will happen. But if we can learn to get present with them, like slow down and get present with your breath, notice what your imagination is doing. When you slow down and you just get present with those two things, you can really regain a lot of creative control in a situation that's starting to feel
Yeah.
out of control.
And I imagine for leaders, especially, like those tools would just be so important, leading through challenging
Mhm.
times. And I want to get to awkward inclusion. I really do. I don't want to. I don't want to bait and switch our viewers out there. But before we get into awkward inclusion, you mentioned scene partner.
Mm.
Who's a scene partner? What does a scene partner do?
That is an improvism. That just means anybody that you're interacting with on stage. That's whoever's on out on the stage with you. In life, that means your coworkers, your significant other, your clients, like whoever you are interacting with. That's just an improvism.
Okay. Because when I heard scene partner, I got really excited because I'm writing my next book on allyship right now.
Oh yeah.
And I talk about allyship as an ongoing relationship between an ally and a partner. And it has to be that ongoing
Hmm.
collaboration to make sure the allies are doing the right thing and to make sure the partners are properly being served, right? And so, like, how do we like have that ally partner relationship,
There's
as
definitely some integration there, I think,
I
and
think there's something there. I think I might need to interview you for my book.
love that plan. Happy to.
I love
Honored
it.
to be asked.
I love it. I love it. So awkward inclusion. Um, does inclusion is inclusion inherently awkward, Andrea, or is this like moments that were to be inclusive would require awkwardness, or like walk me through awkward
Yeah. So
inclusion?
I think that the awkwardness that we feel in intentional inclusion really just kind of depends on like our threshold for like discomfort. If you have gotten to the point where you're like, you know what? I don't know what will happen. And it's very possible that I might say the wrong thing or whatever. It is worth it to try to be an includer. It is worth it to try and listen, to try and ask the questions so that I can learn or whatever, rather than check out because I don't want to break it.
Yeah.
Like the more that you just practice that feeling of, I don't exactly know what will happen, but I trust the people around me. I trust that I am a person of love. I trust that these people are people of love. I trust that it's safe to understand that all of life is improv and I've been improvising since I was a baby and I'm pretty good at it by now. So, like, it'll be all right. Then I think that the feeling of awkwardness has the shame factor removed. And I think
Mm,
that's the major difference. Like, what I would hope for people when they are embracing an includer attitude of any race. Like, I know what it feels like to be the only white person in a room and to be extremely grateful for other people, including me, and,
mhm.
whatever is happening. And so I just felt the need to clarify about that because I didn't want to sound like some kind of white savior being like, it's my job to make everybody feel good. Like, that's not the sentiment of what I'm trying to do, but
No, you weren't that wasn't what you were putting across first and foremost.
okay,
But
great.
secondly, it also applies to things well beyond race, whether it's gender, whether it's sexual orientation, veteran
Excellent.
status, motherhood status, chronic
Mhm.
illness, disability, like it could be any of those things.
That's a
Anytime
great
there's
point.
opportunity for someone who's in an out group, someone who's just not in the in group, right? Someone who's
Mhm.
in the minority group, in the marginalized group, in the disadvantaged group, and the underrepresented group, whatever you want to call it, but they're not in the in group. That is an opportunity for inclusion right there.
Mhm.
So I just want to call that out because
Yeah,
it's
thank
much
you.
more than just race, much more.
You're absolutely right, and I'm appreciative of you saying that. So the point that I kind of stumbled through clumsily earlier, though, is that I care a whole lot about us trusting that it's safe to be uncomfortable, and
Mm,
we'll believe that more when we can remove the shame factor from
mm,
our awkwardness. And
mhm,
so over and over again, I come back to that belief that when you walk in love, and I do think that most of us want to be that way,
mhm,
that doesn't mean that you will walk perfectly, but it does mean there's such a big thought here. It's like hard, all the little words are like blowing up in my brain. But what it does mean is that you'll walk more gently. When you walk in love, here's what it is. You're willing to be a humble learner, you
mm,
know? And I think that so much of the awkward inclusion spirit for me is like, be willing not to be perfect. Be willing not to be impressive. You don't always need to be ready to give a TED talk on whatever you're about to do in your life. It's fine to walk through a situation one little piece at a time. And one thing that I would love to offer when it comes to like the behaviors, what are the behaviors of awkward inclusion? To me, it's this improv concept of bring a brick, not a cathedral. That means bring one small piece. You're not in charge of everything. You're not in charge of the whole cathedral. Bring one piece of it and then just listen. Like literally listen and then explore with curiosity instead of judgment. Whatever that additional brick that's added to yours is, choose to receive it as a gift. Choose to receive it as a gift. Do your best to do your own inside work so that you're not afraid of that brick, even if it's maybe not wrapped. Like sometimes we make each other angry. Sometimes our feelings of defensiveness or reactiveness are activated for a number of reasons. The more we can just practice, it is safe for people not to be perfect in front of me. We can build something that we are proud of together, and we can have laid those bricks imperfectly. Like that's a thing that
mm.
exists.
I love that. And then we were talking a little bit before we went live about, I think it was it creative curiosity or create some.
Oh, yeah. So I know what you're talking about. One of the things that I'm fond of sharing with people are like 4 critical moments. Like this is how you can make sure that you are being an includer. And so essentially they are giving and receiving difficult feedback. The way that you do that really informs people about whether or not they are included. Your behaviors. And really hear me say the way that you receive difficult feedback. Like let that land. Number 2 is moments of self-advocacy when someone is asking you for a raise or a different project or advocating for themselves in some way. Number 3 is self-disclosure when someone is sharing a part of their story, their identity, their experience with you, the way that you respond to that. And then lastly is creative collaboration. And that one often really surprises people because they don't think of creative collaboration as being a point of friction. But it really can be because it's incredibly vulnerable to share your ideas with people.
Yeah.
And yeah, we don't have time, but there's an activity that I sometimes play with clients to help drive this point home about, whose ideas are heard and whose aren't. And if it's not been clear to everyone, this is ultimately what this client needs, or this is ultimately what we're trying to build, or whatever the case may be. If everybody doesn't have the same information to understand what kinds of ideas are useful or where we're at in the process or whatever, which can just easily happen because life is busy and we don't mean for people to not be on the same page, but sometimes it happens. When that dynamic is created and some people's ideas aren't heard, I promise you that if that happens a few times, they're not thinking, I wonder if there's just one piece of information I'm missing. Whatever is tender will start screaming, it's because you're a woman. It's because something. And so I have noticed this in myself. And sometimes I'm not wrong, and I certainly don't mean to be dismissive in that way. But sometimes there really is just a need for there to be more clarity around how do you play this game?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
understand that when you're asking people to be vulnerable and present their ideas to you, the way that you respond, the way that you create space for people's voices and ideas, that means something to people.
I could talk about this all day. I want to spend our last few minutes together, if this is okay, answering a question from LinkedIn because I just think
Mm.
it's so good. And I wanted to end our conversation with going back to your brick metaphor because it was so beautiful. And so the question is, in your opinion, what are some of the things that get in the way of bringing the one brick and receiving other bricks that are added? Like what's getting in the way?
That's a great question. Usually shame. Usually
Mm,
it's shame. And shame shows up in so many different ways, but when we are having trouble bringing just our brick, it's often because it's like, this is the kind of person who blank, fill in the blank, or this person thinks I'm blank. And so then what happens is it's so hard to just answer the question that was presented because we feel the need to explain ourselves or feel the need to be
mhm.
defending ourselves or something. So one of the things that I recommend, and by the way, this is the reason that my first book is a book about forgiveness. I teach that forgiveness is the level 0 starting ground. This is forgiveness of ourselves for times that we've gotten it wrong in the past, forgiveness of the templates of poor communication perhaps we've seen, or poor leadership that perhaps we've seen growing up in our families, churches, communities, first jobs. I don't just mean like your current boss. I'm talking like your story. You are carrying that with you. And so it's the baggage that makes it hard to bring a brick instead of a cathedral, and to trust that, mm, even if the feedback feels prickly, whatever that brick is that's being presented to you, even if it feels prickly, it's safe for this person to be right, that you have some growing to do.
Yeah.
Like it's safe to have noticed that you have some growing to do. In fact, those can be powerful moments for establishing culture when you just model what it looks like to be a humble learner, you
Mm.
know?
Oh, I love that. I could talk to you all day about these things. You are such a gift to your clients and the world. Uh,
Thank you.
for those who want to reach out to Andrea, what's the best way that they get in touch?
Yeah, so I'd love for you to check out my website, www.thecmit.com, so thecmit.com. And you can also message me on LinkedIn. I think this is streaming on LinkedIn. It's also on
Mhm.
Facebook, I think.
Yep.
Um, but then, yeah, you can message me on LinkedIn, or you can shoot me an email at andrea@thecmit.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for everything that you do to help us be better humans at work.
Thank you so much, and